These three disturbing Thanksgiving horror stories are inspired by real events. First, the Black Friday rush turns into 11 minutes of hell when a man is trapped and cooked alive inside his own car. Next, a mother trying to snag a Black Friday deal is executed in a toy aisle over a $50 discount. And finally, a family escapes the crowds for the woods, but finds a silent killer instead. You need to stick around for the end, because the moment a girl wakes up paralyzed next to her lifeless family is absolutely heartbreaking. Cole was rushing to Black Friday tech deals in his new Tesla on I-5 when he rear-ended a truck, causing his electric vehicle's battery to explode in flames that trapped him inside for 11 agonizing minutes while other Black Friday shoppers watched helplessly. November 24th, 2023. It was 3 in the morning, a time when decent folks are sleeping, but the I-5 corridor near Tacoma, Washington was alive and ugly. It was Black Friday. That means the worst kind of traffic. It means thousands of drivers fueled by caffeine and greed, pushing their luck on cold asphalt to save a few bucks on a TV. Cole was right in the thick of it. He was a 29-year-old software engineer out of Seattle. Smart guy, made good money. He was sitting behind the wheel of a brand new Tesla Model Y. He was looking for sales, hunting for the next gadget, checking his dashboard, which glowed with a clean, crisp light. It told him he had 85% battery range. He probably looked at that number and felt satisfied. He was sitting in a climate-controlled bubble, isolated from the noise and the grime of the highway. He felt safe. He didn't know he was strapped to a bomb. Traffic that morning was a mess. It was stop-and-go, bumper-to-bumper tension. The investigation that came later, the one that looked at the wreckage, figured that the Black Friday rush increased the accident risk on that stretch of road by 300% that night. Cole was just a statistic waiting to be filed. He didn't see the semi-truck stop in time. Or maybe the rig cut him off. It doesn't matter who was at fault when physics takes over. Metal met metal. The sleek, aerodynamic nose of that Model Y folded up like a crushed soda can against the steel underride bar of the trailer. The impact was violent. The airbags deployed, a punch to the face followed by a cloud of dust. Cole was thrown forward, then slammed back. The seatbelt did its job. It locked him in tight. He was pinned against the leather, shaken up, shoulder throbbing, but he was awake. He was alive. Usually, after a wreck, you get a second of silence. The engine dies, the fluids leak out, and things go quiet. Not this time. The first sign that this wasn't a normal fender bender was the sound. It wasn't a mechanical grinding. It wasn't a radiator hissing steam. It was a high-pitched, violent hiss, loud and aggressive. It sounded like a high-pressure gas line had ruptured right under his feet. Then came the smell. If you've ever smelled an electrical fire, you know it sticks in your sinuses. But this was different. It wasn't just burning insulation. It was sweet. It smelled like artificial cherries mixed with nail polish remover. It was a thick, chemical stench that hit the back of his throat like acid. That smell means one thing to anyone who knows these cars. The lithium-ion battery pack, that massive slab of energy running the entire length of the floorboard, had been punctured. The casing was breached. The chemistry inside was breaking down. Thermal runaway had started. Cole's survival instinct kicked in. Get out now. He reached for the door handle. In an old truck, you pull a mechanical lever. A cable pulls a latch and the door opens. Simple, reliable. But a Model Y? It uses an electronic button. You press it. A computer sends a signal to a solenoid, and the door pops. He pressed the button. Nothing. He pressed it again, harder. Dead weight. The crash had severed the low-voltage power loop. The brain of the car was dead. The electronic locks were sealed tight. He was trapped. He grabbed for the manual release, but in the dark, with the airbag draped over his legs and the belt digging into his chest, he couldn't find the leverage. He was locked in a box. Then the screaming started. It wasn't Cole, it was the machine. The car's emergency system had gone haywire. A high-pitched digital shriek filled the cabin, bouncing off the glass, drilling into his skull. It was the sound of the computer panicking. He looked in the rearview mirror. He saw it. A thin, elegant curl of white smoke drifting up from the rear of the chassis. It looked almost like dry ice, but then came a flash, sudden, violent. Orange light reflected off the rear window. Fire. This was the beginning of an 11-minute nightmare. 11 minutes. You might hear that and think it's quick. It's not. Try holding your hand over a candle flame for 10 seconds. Now imagine sitting inside the candle. 11 minutes is an eternity when the temperature is rising exponentially every second. The hissing under the floor got louder. It deepened into a roar. It sounded like a jet engine trying to take off, a rushing, sucking noise as the battery cells began to consume themselves. A lithium fire doesn't need air to burn. It makes its own oxygen. It is a self-sustaining furnace, and Cole was sitting on the grate. The heat didn't creep up. It slammed into him. It started at his feet. The floorboards became a skillet. Then the heat traveled up his legs. It wasn't a cozy warmth. It was a prickly, aggressive radiation that made his skin scream. The sweet chemical smell turned foul. It started to taste metallic, like he was chewing on aluminum foil. He coughed, his lungs burning with every breath. The smoke was getting thicker, filling the cabin with a gray, toxic fog. He looked out the window. This is the part that makes you lose faith in people. There were faces right there. Other drivers, Black Friday shoppers, people on their way to buy game consoles and flat screens. They were standing on the shoulder of I-5, illuminated by the red flashing lights of the stopped traffic. They had their phones out. They were filming. They were watching the technology they loved turn on a man. They saw the red glow underneath the car. They saw the smoke pumping out, but they couldn't get close. The heat radiating off that vehicle was already pushing them back. Cole screamed at them. He pounded on the glass with his good arm. But that glass is acoustic. It's laminated. It's engineered to keep the road noise out so you can enjoy your podcast. Now, it was keeping his screams in. He was a silent movie to the crowd outside. He watched them watching him. He realized then that he wasn't a driver anymore. He was cargo. The fire grew angry. The roar was deafening now, drowning out the traffic, drowning out the car's own alarm. The heat was no longer just uncomfortable. It was cooking the air inside the cabin. Sirens cut through the noise. Now, here is the only bit of grace Cole got that night. By all rights, with that Black Friday gridlock, help should have been 20 minutes out. He didn't have 20 minutes, but he got lucky. Pure, twisted luck. A good Samaritan actually put their phone down long enough to dial 911, and it just so happened that a fire rig was already staging right near his exit, anticipating the holiday chaos. They were right there. They rolled up in 11 minutes flat. If they had been stuck in the main flow like everyone else, there wouldn't have been anything left to save. You see the big red truck, you see the guys in the turnout gear, and you think, okay, help is here. Cole felt that rush of relief. He watched them drag the hoses across the asphalt. He heard the pumps kick on. They opened the nozzles. They blasted the car with hundreds of gallons of water. It didn't do a damn thing. That's the nasty truth about these batteries. Standard water doesn't put them out. The water hit the superheated metal, and instantly flashed into steam, adding a scalding white cloud to the mix. Cole could hear the firefighters shouting to each other. He could hear the frustration in their voices. They were dumping a river on him, and the fire was just drinking it up. Every second that water failed, the temperature inside spiked. Cole was baking. His skin was blistering. He was fully conscious for this. He felt every single degree of temperature rise, and it got worse. The fire was so hot, so aggressive, that it didn't stay put. Cole watched through the haze as the flames licked out from under his car. They grabbed the bumper of a minivan stuck in the traffic snarl next to him. He saw a family inside that van, mom, dad, kids returning from shopping, scrambling to get out, terror on their faces as their ride caught fire. Then the flames jumped again, catching a third vehicle. His wreck was creating a chain reaction. He was sitting in the epicenter of an inferno, watching it hurt other people, and he couldn't lift a finger to stop it. 3 other people were loaded into ambulances that night, lungs scorched by the smoke coming from his battery. He closed his eyes. The pain was absolute. The heat was a physical weight crushing him against the seat. He thought that was it. He thought he was going to burn to death on I-5 while strangers recorded it for social media. Then the sound changed. Thump. Hiss. The firefighters switched tactics. They realized water was useless. They brought out the specialized foam. It hit the car with a heavy, smothering noise. It covered the windows, turning the world inside the cabin a dark, muddy gray. The roar of the fire dropped. It was suffocating the reaction. Then came the sound of tools, the screech of hydraulics, the jaws of life, metal tearing against metal. The driver's side door was sheared off its hinges. Hands grabbed him. Thick, rough gloves. They hauled him out of that smoke-filled box and dragged him across the pavement, away from the heat. The air outside was cold and damp. It smelled like diesel exhaust and wet asphalt. After 11 minutes of breathing poison, that dirty highway air tasted like the finest thing on earth. Cole survived. But let's be real about what survival looks like when you spend 11 minutes in a blast furnace. He didn't walk away. They scraped him out. The recovery wasn't a road, it was a wall he had to climb every single day. Third-degree burns covered most of his body. The fire didn't just burn him, it erased him. He went back to work eventually. He sat back down at his desk in Seattle. But he's not the same guy. He can barely function. He's a coder, a guy who needs his hands to make a living. But now, his hands are twisted claws of scar tissue. The skin is tight and fused. He sits there pecking at the keyboard, fighting for every single letter, every line of code a battle against his own body. And his face. You don't want to look, but you have to. The fire melted him. That's the only word for it. The intensity of that 11-minute burn rearranged the features of a 29-year-old man into a mask of shiny red ruin. Where his mouth used to be, there's just a small, tight hole in the skin. His eyes, those eyes that watch the fire build in the rearview mirror, are just peering out of tiny, lidless slits. He wears that 11 minutes on his face every time he steps outside. Tesla looked at the wreck. They admitted that, yeah, battery fires are a known risk. It's physics. But they washed their hands of it. They denied all liability. They pointed the finger at the driver. They called it error. They reduced a man's life being melted down to a line item on a spreadsheet. Cole drives down the same streets. But he's haunted. You walk down a city street these days and you hear it. Or rather, you don't hear it. That low, rolling sound of tires on pavement without an engine to cover it up. The sudden whoosh of an electric car speeding up. Most people don't even notice it. But Cole, when he hears that sound, that heavy, silent approach, he freezes. His breath catches in his throat. His gut tightens into a rock. He stops walking. He waits for the hiss. He waits for that sweet, sickening smell of cherries and melting plastic. He looks at these machines that everyone trusts. We buy them because they're safe. We buy them because they're the future. But Cole knows the truth. He knows that underneath the heated seats and the touchscreens, there's a monster waiting to wake up. And he's left with one question that keeps him up at night. If the thing designed to protect you can turn into a cage that cooks you alive until your own face melts off, what else in this world is just waiting for the right moment to turn on you? Brittany was buying her daughter, Paisley's Christmas present during a Black Friday shopping trip when she was caught in the middle of a shootout at the checkout counter, killed instantly while trying to stop two men fighting over a $50 Nintendo Switch discount. November 24th, 2017. That was the date. You remember that year, don't you? That was the year the Switch came out. It wasn't just a game console. It was the only thing anybody wanted. You couldn't find them anywhere. Shelves were empty from coast to coast. If you saw one, you grabbed it, and you didn't let go until you were safe in your car. In Chattanooga, Tennessee, the desperation was just as thick as anywhere else, maybe thicker. Retail work teaches you a lot about human nature, but working in a hospital teaches you about survival. Brittany knew both sides, but she lived for the second one. She was 28, a nurse who had just pulled a double shift. That's 24 hours of standing on hard tile, cleaning up blood, checking pulses, and telling family members that everything is going to be okay, even when you know it might not be. She was drained, empty, but she wasn't going home to crash. She was sitting in the parking lot of a Target at 2:15 in the morning because she was a mother first and a tired nurse second. Most folks don't understand what it takes to walk into a superstore at that hour. It takes grit. The parking lot was a sea of metal and exhaust under those yellow sulfur lights. It was cold, that damp, heavy Tennessee cold that soaks right through your jacket. Brittany sat there for a minute, blasting the heat in her car, gripping the steering wheel. She probably looked at a photo of Paisley, 6 years old. That's the age where Christmas is still 100% magic. Paisley wanted that Switch. She had probably circled it in the catalog until the paper tore. Brittany wasn't going to let her down. Inside, the store was an assault on the senses. Overhead, the long tubes of fluorescent light hissed. It was a nasty, static sound, like bacon frying in the next room. It dug into your ears. The air was hot and stale, smelling of wet winter coats, cheap floor cleaner, and the sweat of 1,000 people who had been waiting in line for hours. Canned holiday music blared from the ceiling speakers, disjointed and too loud, clashing with the beep, beep, beep of the registers and the low roar of the crowd. Brittany grabbed a cart, one of those metal cages on wheels. She navigated the aisles, moving with the precision of someone used to dodging gurneys in a hallway. She wasn't there to browse. She was there to hunt. She found it. The Nintendo Switch. It must have felt like a miracle. In 2017, holding that red and white box was like holding a gold bar. She put it in her cart. She added a few other things, bringing the total to around $120. That's a serious chunk of change for a single mom, but it matched the gift she had waiting at home. It was the final piece of the puzzle. She headed for the front. Checkout lines at 2:15 a.m. are where the social contract breaks down. You aren't neighbors anymore. You're obstacles. Brittany found a spot in line. She leaned against the handle of her cart, her eyelids heavy. She was so close. Just pay the money, walk out the doors, and sleep. But the air changed. You know that feeling before a thunderstorm? When the pressure drops and your ears pop? That's what happened in the checkout lane. The exhaustion in the room curdled into aggression. Up ahead near the conveyor belt, two men were going at it. It started with muttering. Low voices, sharp tones. But it grew. It got louder than the hissing lights. It got louder than the holiday music. I had my hand on it. One guy snapped. "It's in my cart, man," the other one said. They were arguing over a discount, $50. That was it. A $50 markdown on a Nintendo Switch. Two grown men, standing in a brightly lit store in the middle of the night, ready to throw hands over the price of a tank of gas. Most people did the usual thing. They looked at their shoes. They checked Facebook on their phones. They pretended they were invisible. The cashier, some teenager with wide eyes who definitely wasn't paid enough for this, just froze, holding a scanner like a shield. Target security? Nowhere. The guys in the yellow shirts were probably breaking up a fight over TVs and electronics or dealing with a shoplifter at the door. Brittany didn't look down. Nurses don't look away. When you spend your life fixing broken people, you have an instinct to step in before they break. You see a situation spiraling and you move to stabilize it. It's not heroism, it's training. She stepped forward. Surveillance footage from 2017 is crisp. It shows the whole thing. It shows a young woman in scrubs, exhausted but steady, stepping into the gap between two angry men. She put herself in the line of fire because she thought she could talk them down. She thought reason still mattered. "It's not worth it," she might have said. "It's Christmas." But you can't reason with greed, and you can't reason with a man who feels disrespected. The first suspect didn't care about Christmas. He wanted that $50. He reached into his jacket. There wasn't a slow motion moment where everyone gasped. It was fast, ugly. 1 second it was an argument, and the next second there was a gun. He pulled the trigger. Gunshots inside a building don't sound like they do on TV. They are deafening. A flat, hard crack that hits you in the chest. It echoed off the tile floors and the metal rafters. The bullet wasn't meant for Brittany. It was meant for the guy with the camo jacket. It was meant to win an argument. But Brittany was the one standing there. The bullet hit her in the chest. She fell. She crumbled right there on the scuffed linoleum, right next to her cart, right next to the Nintendo Switch she had fought so hard to find. Panic took over. It was a stampede. People screamed, dropping their bags, diving behind candy racks. The second guy pulled his own gun then, because this is America, and of course he had one too. More shots. A firefight in the checkout line. Brittany died instantly. She didn't get a final word. She didn't get to text her mom. She just ended. A 28-year-old nurse, a mother, a healer, wiped out because two guys couldn't agree on a coupon. Police swarmed the lot. Blue lights painted the storefront. Sirens cut through the cold November air. They caught the guys. Both suspects were charged with first-degree murder and armed robbery. The legal system started its slow, grinding work. But the store had a schedule to keep. Target security refused to comment. Ongoing investigation, they said. That's the corporate wall. You can't climb it. Brittany's family wasn't going to let it slide. They filed a lawsuit, $50 million. They said the store knew. They argued that on Black Friday in 2017, with the hottest toy on the planet on the shelves, the store knew the crowds would be dangerous. They invited the madness in to make a profit, but they didn't pay for the security to keep people safe. $50 million against $50. That's the equation. But let's talk about the real cost. Let's talk about Paisley. She was 6. She was at home, maybe asleep. maybe watching out the window for her mom's headlights. She got the toy. The police gave the family the items from the cart. The Nintendo Switch. Imagine that. Imagine being 6 years old. You open your present. It's the thing you wanted more than anything in the world. It's the magic box. But your mom isn't there to watch you open it. Every time Paisley picks up that controller, every time the screen lights up, she's holding the reason her mother is dead. She is holding the price tag of a human life. That is the horror. It isn't a monster. It isn't a ghost. It's the fact that we built a world where we will trample each other for a discount. It's the fact that a nurse can survive a double shift saving lives, only to be gunned down in a toy aisle. Next time you're in a store and you hear voices raised, listen. Don't look at your phone. Listen to the sound of the crowd. Listen to the hiss of the lights. And ask yourself, what is the price of admission? Brittany paid it. She paid it all. And somewhere in Chattanooga, the echoes of those shots are still ringing in a little girl's ears. A loving father named Robert drove his family 4 hours to camp near Flagstaff for Black Friday outdoor gear deals. But their generator filled their RV with deadly carbon monoxide at 2 a.m., leaving them unconscious and nearly dead, while their $2,400 in camping equipment burned around them. You have to understand something about Robert right off the bat. He was 54 years old, and he wasn't the type of guy to do things halfway. He was a man who appreciated logistics. He liked to plan. Living down in Phoenix, Arizona, you get used to the heat, but Robert wanted to give his family a real experience. He wanted the mountains. He wanted the cold. And most of all, he wanted the deals. It was November 2022. Most folks were sitting at home eating leftover turkey, but Robert had loaded up the whole crew. You had his wife, Abigail, who was 50. Then you had the 2 kids in the back, Christopher, who was 18, and Heather, just 16. They piled into that RV for a solid 4-hour haul north. That's still a decent stretch to sit in a vehicle, climbing from the desert floor all the way up into the pines near Flagstaff. But nobody was complaining. The mood was good. See, this trip was strategic. Robert had done the math. He timed the drive so they could hit the big outdoor stores right when the Black Friday sales kicked off. He wasn't just browsing, he was investing. By the time they headed into the woods, Robert had dropped $2,400 on top-tier gear. We're talking about the good stuff: high-end heaters, new sleeping bags, heavy-duty batteries. The plan was simple: buy the gear, then take it straight out into the wild to test it out over the weekend. It was supposed to be the perfect family shakedown run. They found a spot that was way off the beaten path. Robert didn't want neighbors. He wanted peace and quiet. They parked in a dense patch of forest where the trees grew thick and blocked out the sky. It was isolated. The nearest other campers were at least 3 miles down the road. There was no cell service out there. If you got into trouble, you were on your own. Robert got the camp set up with the kind of efficiency you learn after years of doing it. But the most important piece of equipment out there wasn't the fancy new tents or the chairs. It was the generator. When you're camping in November at that elevation, a generator is your lifeline. It's the heartbeat of the camp. Robert fired it up, and it settled into a steady mechanical rhythm. Chug, 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 chug. It was a reassuring sound. It meant the batteries were charging. It meant the furnace would keep blowing hot air while the temperature outside dropped below freezing. They all settled in for the night, feeling smart, safe, and warm. Engines are simple things, really. They take fuel, they make power, and they spit out exhaust. But if one little thing goes wrong with that airflow, the whole equation changes. Everyone was asleep by midnight. The RV was sealed up tight to keep the heat in. Robert and Abigail were in the main bed. Christopher and Heather were in their bunks. It was dead quiet inside, except for the muffled sound of that generator running right outside the wall. Around 2 in the morning, the machine failed. It didn't quit running. It didn't explode. It just developed a leak in the exhaust system. Instead of pushing those deadly fumes out into the open air, the generator started pumping them right underneath the RV. Carbon monoxide is a nasty business. It acts like a predator that knows exactly how to hide. It's heavier than clean air, and it's invisible. It doesn't smell like smoke. It doesn't taste like gas. It just creeps in. It seeped through the floor vents, slipping past the seals, filling up the cabin while the family slept. It's a simple chemical reaction. The gas enters your lungs and binds to your red blood cells, so oxygen can't get in. It suffocates you from the inside out, but your body doesn't panic because you don't feel like you're choking. You just get heavy. You sink deeper into sleep. Robert, at 54, was a big guy. The gas hit him hard. Abigail and Christopher were the same. They slipped from a normal sleep into a deep chemical coma without ever twitching a muscle. Their brains started to starve for oxygen, cells dying off by the second. But 16-year-old Heather, luck was on her side, or maybe it was a curse. She started to wake up. It wasn't a noise that did it. The generator was still hammering away outside, chug, 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 sounding perfectly normal. It was her own body screaming at her. She opened her eyes in the dark, and immediately, she knew something was broken inside her head. It felt like her skull was being inflated with a bike pump. The pressure was massive, pushing behind her eyes, squeezing her brain. Her throat was parched, dry as sandpaper. And the nausea, it hit her like a physical punch to the gut. She felt the room spinning, tilting on its axis, even though she was lying flat on her back. She tried to sit up. That's when the terror really kicked in. Her brain sent the signal to her arms, lift, push, move, but her muscles were dead weight. It felt like gravity had been turned up 10 times higher than normal. Her arms were like wet cement. Her legs felt like lead pipes that didn't belong to her. She was paralyzed, pinned to that mattress by the poison in her blood. Panic is a strange thing when you can't move. Usually you want to run, you want to scream, but Heather couldn't do either. She opened her mouth to yell for her dad, but her voice was gone. Her vocal cords were paralyzed. All that came out was a wet, ragged wheeze. She lay there in the dark, and the only thing she could hear was her own heart. It was beating slow and hard, thump, 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 struggling to push the poisoned blood through her veins. And underneath that, the relentless sound of the machine outside. Chug, chug, chug. It was loud, too loud. It sounded like it was right inside her ear. She forced her head to roll to the side. It took every ounce of focus she had. She looked across the narrow hallway at her mother. Abigail was just a shape in the shadows, but the shape was wrong. Her head was tipped back at a weird, strained angle. Her mouth was open. She wasn't moving. She looked like a mannequin that had been knocked over. Seeing her mom like that lit a fire in Heather's nervous system. A spike of adrenaline cut through the fog. She threw her weight to the left, using her shoulder leverage to roll off the bunk. She hit the floor. Thud. The carpet was rough against her face. The floor was freezing cold, but she barely felt it. Her senses were all scrambled. The nausea washed over her again, threatening to make her pass out. The gray spots in her vision were getting bigger, swirling around like static on an old TV. She knew somehow that the air was the enemy. A thought punched through the confusion. Get out. She started to crawl. This wasn't a hands and knees crawl. This was dragging a dead body, except the body was her own. She dug her elbows into the carpet and pulled. Her legs trailed behind her, useless dead weight. She dragged herself past the kitchen. Every inch was a war. She reached the area where her dad was sleeping. She could see Robert clearly now. His skin looked gray in the dim light. He looked peaceful, but his chest was barely moving. Christopher was in the bunk above him, just a silent shadow. She wanted to stop. She wanted to grab her dad's hand and shake him awake. She wanted him to fix it because dads are supposed to fix everything. But she knew if she stopped moving, she was going to die right there on the floor next to him. She kept pulling. Her elbows burned. Her heart felt like it was going to crack her ribs open. The door was only a few feet away, but in that condition, it might as well have been miles. She reached the door frame. Now came the hardest mechanics of the night. RV doors are heavy. They have those flat plastic latches you have to pull outward to release the lock. Heather reached up with a shaking hand. Her fingers brushed the plastic, but she couldn't get a grip. Her muscles were shaking so bad she couldn't make a fist. She collapsed back against the wall, gasping for air that wasn't there. The tunnel vision was closing in. The sound of the generator was a roar now, deafening her. She had one shot left. She knew it. She jammed her shoulder against the doorframe to prop herself up. She reached up with both hands, weaving her stiff fingers together over the latch. She didn't try to pull with her arms. Instead, she leaned her whole upper body backward, using her falling weight to jerk the handle. Click. The latch popped. The door swung outward with a screech of dry metal hinges. Heather tumbled out. She fell down the plastic steps and landed hard in the dirt. The shock was violent. The outside air was 20 degrees. It hit her skin like a hammer. She gasped, a huge, desperate inhale. The air burned her throat, freezing and clean. It tasted like pine needles and frost. She coughed, hacking up the bad air, sucking in the good stuff. She tried to stand, but her legs still wouldn't work. She just lay there on the frozen ground, staring up at the black branches of the trees. And right next to her, just a few feet away, that generator kept running. Chug, chug, chug. Just a machine doing its job, oblivious to the fact that it had almost wiped out an entire family. Neighbors 3 miles down the road heard that sound all night long. To them, it was just background noise, just campers enjoying the woods. They didn't know they were listening to a coffin. Heather lay in the dirt for 3 hours before help arrived. She managed to get a weak signal out on a phone she dragged with her. A rescue helicopter had to come in at 5 a.m. The sound of the rotor blades finally drowned out the generator. They all survived. But survival is a tricky word. The carbon monoxide had been in Robert, Abigail, and Christopher's blood for hours. It cooked their brains. They didn't just lose memories or motor skills. They lost everything that made them people. They are empty shells now. They sit in wheelchairs staring at walls, unable to speak, unable to feed themselves, unable to recognize the daughter who saved them. They are vegetables in every sense of the word. And Heather? She didn't get away clean. The gas took a toll on her, too. Her mind is slower now. She has trouble processing simple thoughts. Her memory is full of holes. But she is the only one left standing. At 16 years old, with a brain that doesn't work right anymore, she inherited a family of ghosts. She spends her days changing their diapers. She feeds her father with a spoon, wiping his chin while he stares through her. She pushes her brother's wheelchair. She is the sole caretaker for 3 people who used to take care of her, navigating a world she can barely understand herself. The horror wasn't a ghost. It wasn't a killer hiding in the bushes. It was a machine they bought to keep them safe, And even now, in their silent house where the only sound is the breathing of her sleeping family, she lies awake. She listens to the quiet, which feels heavy and dangerous. She waits for the noise, because in her damaged mind, the silence is the thing that kills you. She is waiting for that engine to start up again,